Something was wrong from the moment the sun rose over Heartland Ranch. The sky looked peaceful. The air felt calm, yet there was a strange heaviness, like the day itself knew a secret. A secret that Amy Fleming's wedding was about to crumble. Before it even began, the morning of the wedding should have felt magical. But instead, everything seemed unnervingly quiet. Amy stood alone near the paddock, brushing a horse with slow, distracted movements. Her dress wasn't on yet. Her hair wasn't done. She wasn't even smiling. Amy looked like someone trying to convince herself she was ready for something her heart wasn't sure about. The wind kept picking up tiny strands of her hair, almost as if trying to pull her attention somewhere else, somewhere she didn't want to look. Inside the house, everyone moved with nervous excitement. Lou buzzed around the kitchen, checking lists, fixing ribbons, and reminding everyone of the schedule. She kept saying it would be the perfect day, but even her voice carried a tight, forced cheerfulness. Jack, meanwhile, watched Amy through the window. He didn't say anything, but his eyes held that familiar concern he always had when Amy was pushing herself too hard. He knew her better than most, and something in her posture, in the way she kept staring at the mountains, told him this wasn't the smooth path she wanted it to be. Nathan, on the other hand, was a bundle of nerves at the far end of the ranch. He kept practicing his vows, stumbling over the same line again and again. His hands shook slightly, and he kept wiping his palms on his suit pants. Every few seconds, he checked the time, then checked his phone, then looked around as if expecting someone to appear with news he didn't want to hear. He wanted this wedding, he truly did, but something had rattled him. He was trying hard to hide it. The rest of the family tried to push aside the tension. From the outside, it looked like a joyful morning, flowers arranged, chairs set up, soft music floating across the ranch. But under all that beauty was a sense of unease, like a crack running beneath the surface. Even the horses acted restless, pacing and snorting quietly in their stalls. It was as if they felt the pressure Amy was trying to tuck away behind her. Calm expression. As Amy finally turned toward the house to begin getting ready, her eyes lingered one last time on the horizon. She wasn't scared of marriage, not exactly, but something deep inside her whispered that the day would not end the way everyone hoped. And as she took a slow, shaky breath, the story of the wedding that would soon collapse silently began. First crack in the perfect wedding day didn't come from shouting or arguments. It came from something much quieter, something small enough to ignore, yet strong enough to change everything. It began with Amy's phone buzzing on the dressing table, a simple vibration, a single message. But the moment she saw the caller, ID, her whole expression shifted. Her lips tightened, her breath caught, and her hands froze in midair. She didn't open the message. She didn't need to. The name alone was enough to shake her. Lou noticed the change right away. She stepped closer with a warm smile meant to calm nerves. But Amy quickly flipped the phone face down and forced out a weak laugh. "Just last-minute stuff," she said, but her voice thinned at the end. Lou didn't push, but the doubt in. Her eyes revealed she wasn't convinced. Still, she returned to fixing Amy's hair, humming softly, as if music could smooth over the tension growing in the room, down by the ceremony site. Nathan felt his own wave of worry when he overheard two guests whispering behind a row of chairs. He didn't catch every word, only bits and pieces just enough to sting. Is she rushing this? Still misses him, not the same since. The rest drowned in the wind, but the meaning hit him hard. Nathan looked away, tightening his jaw, trying to block out the thoughts the whispers planted in his mind. He had always known marrying Amy meant accepting her past, but he didn't expect the past to feel so present today. Georgie arrived next, moving quickly through the ranch. With the kind of energy that meant she had something important to say, she found Amy outside the house, taking a moment alone before walking to the ceremony. Without hesitation, Georgie asked, "Are you sure you're ready for this?" It wasn't judgment. It was fear. It's real fear. Amy tried to answer, but the words tangled in her throat. Instead of speaking, she smiled, nodded, and looked away. Georgie didn't look satisfied. She knew Amy better than most. She saw the tremble in her hands. Then the sky changed. Not dramatically, not the kind of change that brings rain or storm, but in a strange, unsettling way. A shadow rolled over the ranch, dimming the light for just a moment. The breeze grew cooler, sharper, carrying a sense of warning. Even the horses seemed to feel it, lifting their heads, ears alert, shifting anxiously in their stalls. By the time Amy stepped toward the ceremony aisle, the uneasy feeling had become impossible to ignore. The people were smiling. The decorations were perfect. The music played softly, but beneath it all, something felt off. Something was building, quietly and steadily, waiting for the right moment to break through. Amy felt it. Nathan felt it. And soon, everyone else would too. The moment Amy stepped toward the aisle, time seemed to slow, not in the romantic way most weddings feel, but in a heavy, unsettling way that made the air feel thicker. Guests turned toward her with warm smiles, but she barely saw them. Her eyes were locked forward, trying to focus on Nathan, trying to push away the feeling that something was about to go terribly wrong. Nathan stood waiting beneath the archway, hands clasped in front of him, trying to look calm. But his shoulders were stiff, and his smile didn't touch his eyes. When he saw Amy, his breath caught not out of awe, but out of confusion. She looked beautiful, yes, but she also looked haunted, as if part of her wasn't really there. Jack noticed it too. He always did. From his seat, he watched Amy with the same deep, thoughtful gaze he used when a horse was spooked for reasons no one else could see. Lou straightened in her chair, her excitement suddenly dimming as she read Amy's tight grip on her bouquet. The faint tremble in her steps. Amy moved forward, but every step felt heavier than the last. Her heart wasn't racing in joy, it was pounding in warning. And as she passed the rows of guests, every whispered compliment seemed to drift through her like smoke, unable to reach her. When she finally reached Nathan, she forced a smile. He held out his hands. She took them, but her fingers felt cold in his, and Nathan's brow creased just slightly. Not enough for the crowd to notice, just enough for Amy to see. The officiant began speaking, his voice gentle, but Amy heard almost none of it. The world around her dimmed, as if someone slowly turned down the sound. Her mind drifted not to doubts, but to memories she couldn't stop. Ty's smile, Ty's laugh. Ty's hands guiding hers at the reins. She had told herself she was ready to move forward. She wanted to be. But memories weren't something you could simply switch off. Nathan continued staring at her, searching her face for reassurance. Instead, he found a flicker of fear, but hit him like a cold wave. The vows came next. Nathan went first. His voice shook at the start, but he pushed through, speaking from the heart. He talked about new beginnings and trust, and building a life together. Guests leaned in, touched by his sincerity. But while he spoke, Amy stood frozen, hearing the words, but feeling like she was watching a life she wasn't sure belonged to her. Then the officiant turned to Amy. "Your vows," he said softly. She opened her mouth. No words came. A silence fell over the ceremony, not the soft, emotional kind, but a sharp, tense pause that made every guest hold their breath. She swallowed hard, trying again, but her breathing grew shallow, uneven. Nathan's face shifted from nervousness to worry. Jack leaned forward. Lou whispered, "Amy." And still, she couldn't form a single sentence. The ceremony hadn't fallen apart yet, but the collapse had already begun. And everyone could feel the ground starting to crack beneath them. The silence around Amy stretched so long that even the wind seemed afraid to move. She stood there, frozen, her lips parted but no sound coming out. Guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The officiant glanced between the couple, trying to decide whether to step in or wait. Nathan gently squeezed Amy's hands, hoping it would pull her back into the moment. But instead, she pulled her hands away as if the touch burned. And then, it happened. A voice sliced through the tense quiet. "Amy, wait." Every head turned at once. Someone stood at the edge of the ceremony space, breathless, holding a phone in one hand. It was the same person who had been trying to reach her all morning. Someone Amy did not expect to see here. Her face drained of all color. The bouquet slipped from her fingers, hitting the ground with a soft thud that sounded louder than it should. Have any thought looked from the unexpected guest to Amy? Confusion twisting into something darker, fear he had been trying desperately. To ignore Amy? Who is that? Whispered, though his voice cracked on the last word. The guest stepped closer, eyes full of concern instead of anger. I didn't come to ruin anything, but you need to know. You can't pretend this. It isn't tearing you apart. Their tone was soft, not dramatic. But the truth behind the words slammed into the ceremony like a storm. Amy shook her head. Not here. Please. Not here. Her voice trembled so badly it barely sounded like hers. But it was too late. Truth was already spilling out silently through the way she held her arms tight against herself. Amy opened her mouth again, but the only thing that escaped was a sob. Not loud, but real. The kind of sob that comes from a wound you've been trying to keep covered for far too long. The guests murmured in shock. Lou stood quickly, her hand over her mouth. Jack stayed still, but his eyes softened with a sad, quiet understanding. He knew this wasn't a sudden crisis. This was the weight of everything Amy had held inside, finally crushing through. I tried, Amy cried, wiping her face. I tried so hard to be ready, but I'm not. I thought if I stayed busy, if I kept moving forward, the past would stop pulling at me, but it hasn't. Nathan's expression tightened. What are you saying? You don't love me? He asked. He didn't shout it. He whispered it, which somehow hurt even more. I do, Amy said quickly. But I'm still holding on to something I haven't healed from, and it's not fair to you. The single sentence hung in the air like lightning suspended in a cloud. Nathan closed his eyes, breathing shakily. The truth had landed, and there was no undoing it. He opened them again, and this time they were filled with heartbreak. Then, we can't do this, he said, voice barely audible. No one moved. No one breathed. Nathan turned away from Amy, from the crowd. From the future they had tried to build, and walked off the aisle. Not fast, not dramatic. Just slowly, painfully, like a man leaving behind something he wanted but could no longer hold. And that quiet walk was the exact moment the wedding collapsed. No explosion. No shouting match. Just the soft, devastating sound of two hearts breaking in front of everyone, the moment Nathan disappeared beyond the barn. The world around Amy seemed to fall completely silent. Not the peaceful kind of silence. This one was sharp, heavy, painful. The guests didn't know where to look or what to do. Some stared at their shoes, others whispered in confusion, but no one dared approach her. Amy stood alone at the center of the aisle, her wedding dress glowing under the soft afternoon light. But she looked more fragile than she ever had in her life. Lou was the first to move. She rushed toward Amy with trembling hands, not as a sister, handling a crisis, but as someone watching a heart break in real time. Amy, sweetheart, she whispered, placing her arms around her. Amy didn't fall. She didn't collapse. She just stood stiff, as if her body refused to let her crumble, even though her spirit wanted to. I ruined everything, Amy murmured, her voice so thin that Lou had to lean closer just to hear. Hurt him. I hurt everyone. No, Lou said, shaking her head firmly, her embrace growing tighter. You didn't ruin anything. You just told the truth. And that takes more courage than pretending. But even as she spoke, Lou's eyes were glassy. She wasn't sure if she believed her own words, but she needed Amy to hear them. Jack approached next, moving slower than usual. He removed his hat, holding it against his chest, his face etched with deep lines of worry and understanding. He didn't hug her right away. Instead, he placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Amy, he said in that steady voice she had relied on her whole life. Sometimes the hardest decisions are the ones that look like mistakes to everyone else. But what if it was a mistake? Amy whispered, barely holding back tears. What if I just walked away from something good because I'm scared? Jack let out a long breath. Being scared doesn't make you weak, he said. It makes you human and grief. Grief doesn't follow a schedule. It doesn't disappear because the calendar says it should. Those words cracked something inside her. Not in a breaking way, but in a way that let the truth breathe. Nearby, Georgie watched with a mixture of relief and sadness. She had seen Amy struggling long before today, but she hadn't expected everything to unravel so quickly. Still, she knew this collapse wasn't sudden. It was the result of months, maybe even years, of Amy trying to outrun the shadows of her past. Inside the barn, Nathan leaned against a stall door, his face buried in his hands. He wasn't angry, he was shattered. The kind of heartbreak that doesn't explode, but sinks slowly like a stone into deep water. He could still hear the guests murmuring behind him, but he tried to block out the noise, tried to breathe. He had loved Amy enough to hope she was ready, but not enough to change the truth she finally voiced. Back at the ceremony site, chairs were being quietly folded, flowers carried away, decorations untied. The perfect wedding scene was disappearing piece by piece. Just as the future everyone expected drifted further out of reach, Amy finally stepped out of Lou's arms, her face pale but composed. She looked around at the fading remnants of the Datha aisle she didn't finish walking, the arch she never stood under. The people who had come to witness joy but stayed to witness pain. And yet, beneath all that sorrow, there was a strange, quiet clarity forming inside her. A new understanding that today wasn't the end of her story, it was the end of pretending. Everything hurt. Everything was messy. Everything felt wrong. But somewhere deep inside, Amy felt the very first spark of relief, a tiny, trembling relief. That came from finally admitting the truth she'd been afraid to face. The wedding had collapsed, but Amy herself was finally beginning to breathe. The ranch grew strangely quiet after the guests left, as if the land itself was holding its breath. The celebration tents were half taken down, ribbons untying themselves in the wind. Petals scattered across the grass like traces of a story that ended too soon. Amy walked slowly across the yard, her dress brushing the dirt, no longer glowing the way it had that morning. She didn't care. She wasn't thinking about the dress, the ceremony, or what people would say. She was thinking about the moment. Her voice failed her about the truth she couldn't force away anymore. She ended up in the barn, the one place that always accepted her without questions. The horses stirred softly, shifting in their stalls, sensing her pain the way they always could. Her favorite mare leaned her head over the railing, nudging Amy's shoulder gently. That simple touch made Amy break. Tears fell silently down her cheeks as she buried her face into the horse's neck, letting the warmth calm her shaking breath. It was the first time all day she allowed herself to fully feel everything. Behind her, Lou approached quietly, not wanting to startle her. She leaned against the barn door, arms folded, eyes soft with understanding. "Everyone's gone," she said gently. "We didn't let them ask questions. Jack handled that part." Amy nodded without looking up. "Thank you," she whispered. Lou stepped forward. "I know this feels like the worst day of your life, but sometimes the worst days are the ones that show us what we've been hiding from." Amy wiped her face. "I didn't want this. I didn't want to hurt Nathan. I didn't want to ruin everything." "You didn't ruin anything," Lou insisted softly. "You stopped yourself from stepping into a life that wasn't right for it. You not yet, maybe not ever." "That's not destruction, Amy. That's honesty." Amy let the words sink in, but the pain still twisted in her chest. "Nathan didn't deserve this." "No," Lou agreed. "It didn't. But you didn't deserve to force yourself into something you weren't ready for either." Meanwhile, on the far side of the ranch, Nathan sat alone in his truck. He hadn't started the engine. He couldn't. His hands rested on the steering wheel. But his mind was somewhere else, replaying every moment from the ceremony. Every sign he ignored because he wanted so badly to believe this would work. His sorrow wasn't from anger, but from heartbreak and confusion. He loved Amy, but love wasn't always enough to heal someone else's wounds. Jack walked over slowly, giving Nathan space until he reached the open window. "Talk if you want," Jack said. "Sit in silence if you don't. I'm not here to push either way." Nathan stared at the ranch house, his voice barely above a whisper. "Did I do something wrong?" Shook his head. "No, son. You just loved someone who's still learning how to stop hurting." Nathan closed his eyes, absorbing the truth. It hurt, but it made sense. Back in the barn, Amy finally lifted her head. She looked stronger now, still hurting, still fragile, but not broken. She was beginning to understand the difference between running forward and truly moving forward. Standing in the quiet barn, surrounded by the animals that had carried her through every storm, Amy realized something important. The collapse of the wedding wasn't the end of her journey. It was the moment she finally stopped pretending to be fine, and when she stepped outside into the fading light, the sky was clearing. Not because the pain had faded, but because, for the first time in a long time, Amy was standing in the truth instead of hiding from it. As the last traces of daylight slipped behind the hills, Heartland Ranch felt different, quieter, heavier, but strangely clearer. The space where the ceremony had once stood was now empty. No chairs, no flowers, no archway, just a bare patch of land, like the ranch itself had erased the scene to help everyone breathe again. Amy walked slowly across that empty space, her footsteps soft on the grass. Her wedding dress gathered in her hands to keep it from dragging. She stopped right where she had stood earlier, when she couldn't speak the vows. The silence around her wasn't crushing anymore. It was honest. Lou and Jack watched from the porch, their expressions calm but thoughtful. They didn't come to her, didn't rush to fill the moment with advice or questions. Amy needed this moment not as a bride who walked away from a wedding, but as a woman who finally faced the truth she had been burying. She stood with her arms folded, the breeze tugging at the loose strands of hair that had once been pinned perfectly. Perfection didn't matter now. What mattered was what came next. Georgie joined them on the porch, crossing her arms as she watched Amy stare at the quiet field. "She'll be okay," she said with a confidence that came from knowing Amy's strength better than most. "It'll take time, but she'll find her way." Jack nodded. She always does. Inside the barn, the horses settled for the night, their movements steady and comforting. Amy eventually walked back toward them, drawn to the familiar warmth. She entered the stall of her favorite mare and sat on a hay bale, letting the calmness wash over her. She ran her fingers through the horse's mane, breathing slowly, finding a rhythm that helped quiet her thoughts. In that stillness, something shifted. Not a dramatic change, something much softer, like the first hint of dawn. Amy realized she didn't need to rush into a new beginning. She just needed to allow herself to start healing on her own time. She had always been the girl who could ride through any storm, but she had forgotten that even the strongest riders need a moment to rest. A soft noise at the barn door made her look up. It wasn't Lou. It wasn't Jack. It was a small, folded note someone had left on the hay outside the stall. Amy picked it up carefully. She didn't know who it was from until she saw the handwriting Ethan's. The note was short. No blame, no anger, just time for both of us. Amy held the note to her chest, letting out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. It wasn't closure, not fully, but it was kindness. And it opened a path toward something other than guilt. She stepped outside the barn, the cool night air settling around her. The stars were beginning to appear, scattered across the sky like small promises. She looked up at them, remembering all the nights she had stood here with Ty, talking about dreams, about the future, about healing. The memories didn't stab her this time, they settled gently, like reminders of where she had been and how far she still needed to go. Amy placed Nathan's note in her pocket and took a deep breath. The collapse of the wedding wasn't her ending. It was the start of a new chapter, one where she could move slowly, rebuild herself, and rediscover who she was beyond the ranch, beyond the memories, beyond the expectations. Season 19 wasn't going to be about loss anymore. It was going to be about Amy finding her strength again, one step, one day, one truth at a time.